Hello and welcome to our webcast for October 19, 2018. My name is Christian Debré and this is Amy Osbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet.
Hello.
Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet. Okay, also joining us is Taylor Ayat, the one on the bottom here. Okay, is our policy analyst and outreach coordinator.
Hi.
Hi. Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities, and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminates people with disabilities. Today's topic, because we have only one, discrimination in hospital after a natural disaster. And Amy Asbrook will talk with us about this subject.
Yep, and let's hope that this topic is not in itself a natural disaster. Okay. So, 2 weeks ago, we discussed the effects of disability on planning for and recovering from natural disasters. We briefly touched on the ways in which scarce rescue and healthcare resources are allocated in a major emergency. Hospitals already do this every day. Emergency departments and intensive care units routinely use triage systems rather than by randomized methods like first come, first serve, or by lottery to dictate who is treated first and who gets access to limited intensive care unit beds and diagnostic imaging equipment. In normal conditions, when resources are plentiful and demand is within a normal range, the sicker you are, the sooner you will be treated. And for example, someone with a broken arm or a broken bone will probably be treated before a person with a stuffy nose.
Yes, it's obvious.
Yeah, so there already are systems of triage in place.
And this kind of thing is kind of natural,
right,
for this example.
Right, exactly. A little history. Napoleon's battle surgeon, Baron Dominique Jean Larrey, was the first to use a system of triage and field ambulances. His plan was guided by the idea that those who are dangerously wounded should receive the first attention without regard to rank or distinction, in keeping with the French Revolution's value of égalité.
This guy was very, very far in advance for this time of the
history. This is the beginning of the 1800s, so this is pretty...
Yeah, Napoleon ended his reign in 1815, I think.
Something like that, yes. Okay. So, but the goals of battlefield triage are not the same as in hospitals or disaster situations. In 1846, British naval surgeon John Wilson assigned a higher priority to people whose treatment was likely to be successful. His policy delayed treatment to people with less severe wounds and to those whose wounds are probably fatal. This trend continues to today.
Yes.
So it's something that was it started in the battlefield because you want to get soldiers back on the line, and they sort of started giving up on soldiers who were really that terribly wounded.
Yeah.
Okay, triage has 3 elements. A situation where there are not enough resources for the number of people who need them, someone in authority who evaluates each person's needs and assigns them a priority, and priorities are assigned according to an established system or plan. Okay, it's worth noting that the values that are supposed to guide triage systems may be more dangerous to disabled people than they appear. And some of those values are to preserve and protect endangered human lives. So that's one of them. But if since disabled lives are often not considered fully human, this value may not be strictly applied to disabled people. And, you know, this is a way in which the system of triage could become more dangerous for disabled people. Also, the value to preserve and restore function or health, it could be a problem because disabled people cannot be, quote unquote, restored to, quote unquote, normal.
We could not be restored most of the time.
Yeah. And this value could act as a prejudice against us, as a disadvantage, actually.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot, especially in managed care, where the goal is to, you know, improve function. Well, if you have a spinal cord injury, your function is not going to improve. And so you create problems for the managed care system. And finally, the value of efficient use of resources to achieve the best overall outcome could go against people with disabilities, where the first two values don't strongly support the care of disabled people. Use of resources to help them will not be considered efficient, because people say, well, you know, the person's not gonna ever be able to walk, so why bother?
Yeah.
And finally, fairness is one of the values, and there are two values within fairness. First is the actions that conform to the agreed upon rules. And we'll talk about those rules in a minute, but keep in mind when we get down to talking about what happened in New Orleans, they did not go by the agreed upon rules.
Yeah.
No.
Was the problem.
Yeah. And also actions that conform to accepted standards or principles. But the question ultimately is, what is accepted in a society that views life with a disability as a fate worse than death? It's, you know, that's where it can turn it as a double-edged sword against disabled people. Okay, most triage systems go something like this. Priority 1 is people who need immediate treatment to save their lives, and that gets a red tag. Priority 2 is people who need urgent but not immediate medical care, a yellow tag. Priority 3, people requiring only minor treatment, green tag. Priority 4, people who are not physically injured but who may be traumatized or disoriented, get a white tag. And finally, last priority is people who are so severely injured that they are expected to die within a few hours or days, and they get a black tag.
This kind of colored tag are kind of known by people because different TV show. Okay?
Yeah.
And we have saw it many times.
Right. So, but the Canadian triage and acuity scale is more optimistic and doesn't have that black tag category. The number one level 1 priority is for resuscitation, that's blue. Level 2 is emergency or emergent, and that's red. Level 3 is urgent, and that's yellow. 4 is less urgent, and that's green, and 5 is non-urgent, and that's white. So those are two of the standard triage systems. And they have all these things about, you know, which organs have failed and which are going to fail and that kind of thing. It's all blah, blah, blah. So when we talked about disasters 2 weeks ago, we mentioned a book by Dr. Sherry Fink called 5 Days at Memorial about the events and decisions that led to an estimated 20 people being euthanized at a New Orleans hospital after Hurricane Katrina.
Without having asked for.
Right. Yeah. The staff identified people with do not resuscitate orders, those who couldn't walk, or who were difficult to carry as the last to be evacuated. So evacuation was going along, but it was slow, and those people were on the last to go list.
And they prefer to euthanize those people than to take chance that they will be evacuated later.
Well, right. I mean,
just a notion of the time of evacuation,
right,
and the difficulty. Not is it life thinking things or whatever. It's just practices.
right. So even they were the last on the list, even though most of them were not in danger of dying. So they may have had a DNR, but they weren't in danger of dying.
Yeah, normally a DNR is because of their own sickness, like a heart disease or something like that.
Or DNR is just in case,
Yes.
case something happens.
But
then,
not a disaster.
Right.
Everybody must be rescued.
Right, and it's not supposed to be in case somebody does something really stupid.
Yeah, or an accident or something like that.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. As the stressful conditions continued into the third day, and the medical staff were being
only
airlifted
3
out.
days. Only 3 days.
Right, and there was a lot of stress. There was no air conditioning. It was very hot. They didn't have sanitation. They did have drinkable water. They had water bottles, but they didn't have sanitation.
And for sanitation, they could have used the water from the flooding just by boiling it, or even if
there's probably a lot of backups and stuff. Anyway,
yeah.
I mean, it was a very, very difficult situation. They were hearing gunshots outside. There was a radio talk show person that was hyping the crime
something stressful
problems.
And afraid, but not frightening. Not.
Well, people did think their lives were at risk.
Yes, but
right. Well, yeah, you have a different perspective than they did. They were afraid for their lives, and when it continued into the third day, and the medical staff were being airlifted out, it became clear that this group of patients would not be evacuated. Rather than abandoning them, medical staff elected to administer high doses of morphine and sedatives to euthanize them.
And abandon it. Why? They should have at least 1 or 2 people able to take care, because those patients doesn't need so much food, just a little bit of water and sometimes medication. That's it.
Right. Okay? And there were still helicopters coming to airlift, and there was boats also that were coming to help evacuate people. It wasn't as though people weren't being evacuated.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a panic thing. And in other hospitals, there were similar situations, but everybody was evacuated. Yeah. So it's just really
somebody panicked. Somebody panicked.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody panicked. So where they exist, protocols for medical resource allocation are usually drawn up by government agencies, panels of experts, or hospital administrators and insurance actuaries, which are not necessarily the best people to be doing it.
Nope.
While some of these policies are flexible, others call for refusing care to older adults and those with medical conditions such as kidney failure or advanced cancer. Ontario developed a protocol in 2006 following the SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome outbreak, to prepare for a large-scale epidemic.
Especially,
yeah, go ahead.
Especially here in Canada, we get a lot of illnesses related to the cold and related to having to be packed like sardines in places that are warm. What can hospitals do to prepare for times when we know that the rates of illness are going to go up, like flu season?
Right. And they already do, offer inoculations against the flu. And
I just got mine yesterday.
Yeah, and we're going to get ours next month.
And about catastrophe, we had a high storm in 1998. It was great practice,
yeah.
But it was a failure too. Nobody died, but because it was a very, very slow catastrophe. But people panicked too.
Yeah. So a lot of people were living without electricity for weeks and months after that.
But there was a lot of possibilities.
Right. And there are a lot of potential problems when a lot of people are together in one place. diseases can spread very quickly, and that's something that we have to keep in mind. So in 2016, Sherry Fink reported on a series of public consultations held in the state of Maryland to create a policy for prioritizing healthcare in an emergency. The organizers found that a broader perspective raised some unexpected questions about discrimination and access to ventilators for people in a coma. So, you know, they weren't government people, they were just ordinary members of the public, and they had some pretty different ideas that startled the coordinators. These issues are not limited to developed or Western countries. Following the 2011 earthquake and nuclear meltdown at the Fukushima facility, those whose evacuations from nearby hospital were delayed ran a greater risk of radiation poisoning, because obviously it's going to take some time to evacuate everybody, and the longer they were there, the more they were irradiated.
Yes.
And during the 2014 Ebola outbreaks in Africa, healthcare workers could spend only a short time in biohazard suits that overheated.
Yeah, it's obvious where you are encapsulated in a plastic suit,
right,
under the sun.
Right. It's not something that one would have expected, but there it is. It's another way that resources became limited. So that it limited patient care and forced agonizing choices.
So where would the development of new diseases come in? At least in the developed world, nobody knew what Ebola was until a few years ago.
Right. And when they developed the flu vaccine, they're kind of guessing based on history and what's going on, what is going to be the flu that is going to be predominant that season. They have to guess months in advance because they have to create the supply of vaccine.
Yeah, and
so
then when they miss, you
oops.
have a yes.
You have an oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with the fact that people can travel so quickly, you could have a very contagious disease, not be sick with it, and be spreading it around by flying halfway across the world.
Even for sickness like Ebola, you could be you could contract Ebola and still able to travel without being sick for a few hours before.
Right.
So you could go all around the world before getting sick.
Right, exactly. And suddenly you're bringing Ebola to Texas.
Yes,
Which happened, is what happened, yeah. Okay, it's not just in triage and allocation policies that disability discrimination shows up. Under the Trump administration, and I'm still not using the word president and the guy's name in the same sentence.
Yeah, Trump. Yeah.
Right. The Federal Emergency Management Agency in the U.S. has reduced the number of accessibility coordinators available to deal with disability issues at disaster sites from 60 to 5. So
it is a disaster.
Talk about a man-made disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talk about somebody who do bad decision. This is one.
Right.
Obvious one.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just for perspective, before there had been a little over one person per state, and now there's only one person for 10 states.
For Canadians, just think about it. There is one responsible for every 30 million people. And we are so only one people supervise all the Canada disaster in one shot.
Right, all the accessibility for all the disasters.
Wow.
Right.
Think about the efficiency.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Wicked efficient. Marcy Roth of the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies is a former FEMA employee.
FEMA is
FEMA,
the
Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Yes, they manage the emergency
Right.
for all things.
She anticipates a lot of confusion and unmet needs following the cuts.
No.
You think?
Oh.
Well,
Yeah.
Coordinators are now expected to supervise disaster areas by phone rather than on site.
And you just remember, when one of the first thing who fail in a catastrophe is communication.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'd love to be up there by phone, but the phone lines aren't working. So
Yeah.
and the other thing is, of course, people who are supposed to be planning for accessibility, non-disabled people generally forget why you need to have ramps, why you need to keep the path of travel clear.
Just a tighter door or a bump somewhere could ruin all plans you have done for months.
Right, exactly. So it's really necessary to have a person with a disability or with disability experience on site to deal with the problems, because other people are going to get freaked out by the kinds of problems that come up and they won't be able to deal. Okay. Some people at Memorial Hospital in New Orleans had family members with them to advocate on their behalf to get water and medications, or to try to get do not resuscitate orders removed.
At least there was, for
Right.
a few people, there was somebody.
Right. Even so, some of these family members who would only leave the hospital with the assurance that their loved one would shortly be evacuated, later found out that their relative had been euthanized.
But don't worry, they will be evacuated.
Right. And you know, that's what happened. People would say, I don't want to leave because I don't want my mother to be euthanized. And they would say that she's going to be, right. It's the dog show. Somebody didn't read our little sign that says,
Oh dear.
Okay, so you know, people would say, I'm not going to leave my mother unless, because I'm worried that she won't be evacuated. And they would say, no, don't worry, she's going to be evacuated. You have to leave now, and your mother will be evacuated. Don't worry.
Yeah,
and
don't
then
worry.
Mom was euthanized. So, yeah. Thanks a lot.
Another variable that I'm curious about, at least in Ontario, there's a, forgive my choice of words here, a flood of seniors taking up space in hospitals because they're waiting for either a spot in a long-term care home or home care available in their home.
Right.
If you had an emergency plus that,
right,
what are they going to do?
And politicians often claim, and rightly so, that they are making more long-term care spaces available, but they're not keeping up with the population that needs them. I mean, it doesn't matter if you make a few beds available if there are more people who need them. And also, they're not providing care in the home. They're not providing consumer-directed home-based care that would enable people to run their own services.
With like the new government may do a little bit better in Quebec, because if they could put the money and the money could follow the patient,
right?
And it costs around $800
well,
a week.
It's very sensible from a conservative point of view. So you would think that Doug Ford in Ontario and
Ontario is not the same problem.
would provide home-based services, but you know,
it's an economy.
We're not
it costs less.
We're not sure that they will.
If they do, it costs less.
Right. It would make sense for a conservative to do it, but they don't generally.
Yeah, normally the logic doesn't work with politics.
Right. Okay. So, unfortunately, we have to be vigilant in demanding assistance to live and not to die. So, any other comments, Taylor?
I had one and it escaped me.
Okay, sorry.
It's all right. It'll wait until next week.
Actually, we won't be here next week because we will be in Winterpeg.
Yes.
Interpret.
Yeah.
So I hope that our colleague's prediction doesn't come true. We were on a phone call with someone who was saying, "Watch out because it's already snowed over here."
Yeah.
Yes.
You.
Yeah.
We come back to the tropics of Quebec. All right. So if you want more information about the subjects we discuss here, you can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujours vivant, not dead yet. You can visit our website at tvndy.ca. You can email us at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks to Christian for helping out, and also to Taylor, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.